So the possible game of the year, God of War, has dropped and many people are loving it. Like the game is amazing, like in terms of storytelling, the combat, gameplay, and the graphics, man, it looks beautiful. Now, since Kratos entered into Norse mythology, starting with the 2018 game, people have compared it to the MCU, especially when Odin and Thor were mentioned. But now in Ragnarok, we get to meet these characters and they are so widely apart from their MCU counterpart. And of course, people will always compare. That's how we are. So I'm going to go right ahead and get started. And with that, I'm starting off with Loki, Atreus' true identity, and comparing to the MCU, this is the character that is so widely apart, so different from the Loki that we know in the MCU in terms of everything. First off, Atreus, Loki, he's the son of the Greek god of war, Kratos, and a giant fae. But in the MCU, Loki is the adopted son of Odin and the half-brother of Thor. And also compared to Tom Hiddleston's amazing portrayal of the character, this Loki is much more kind, much more compassionate, heroic even, and noble, since he's taught by Kratos to be better than him in terms of everything, especially when it comes to personality level. But with Tom's Loki, of course, by now we all know who he is. He started off as a villain, the jealous brother, and was even the villain for the Avengers movie. And then down the line, he started going on onto that anti-hero route, and now he's pretty much solidified himself as that type of person since his show came out. And yeah, he started to even feel like a hero sometimes. The only similarities between them is that they both have a giant heritage, Loki being the son of the giant king before he was adopted by Odin, and Atreus' mother being a giant. We now move on to this new character introduced in Ragnarok. Of course, he was teased at the end of the 2018 game, that is Thor. And just in terms of physical appearance, people compared him to Fat Thor in Avengers Endgame. That is until he got back in shape in Thor Love and Thunder. Now, God of War's Ragnarok's Thor is just a drunk and pretty much a hired muscle for Odin and just treated poorly by his father. Unlike the MCU Thor, who Odin loves, he's much more noble. Of course, he's a hero, he's part of the Avengers, and when it comes to the drinking department, he only became that type of person who was going through it in Avengers Endgame. I mean, having a wife like Sif, you will think that Thor will sober up real quick. I mean, just look at her. Now we move on to Freya, but in the MCU she's called Frigga. And from the 2018 game, and if you've watched the MCU movies, the Thor movies to be exact, you will notice immediately the exact difference between her and the version of her in the MCU. Frigga in the MCU is much more soft-spoken, even though she's also teased to be strong in her own right. Of course, she's a freaking god. She's going to be strong in her own level. We've only seen a little portion of that, since her screen time in the MCU is just minimal to say the least. But with the God of War, Freya, she's much more strong. Of course, she's also soft-spoken. She's also kind and generous, warm-hearted. That is to those who she cares or calls or deems as her friends. But she's much more vengeful, much more of a warrior who, unlike the MCU version, split off from Odin and was banished to live in Midgard. And in Ragnarok, she's much more of a warrior, a goddamn strong one too, more than Frigga ever was in her entire MCU run. Now we have Heimdall, and similar to Thor and Odin, he's also a villain in this God of War Ragnarok game. Instead of the strong Bifrost wielding character that Idris Elba plays in the MCU. Plus also, he's a friend of Thor's, even though they didn't show that much of their relationship. But in God of War Ragnarok, there's no Bifrost for Heimdall to take control of or use. He's much more cocky, he's sinister, always looking for a fight, and he's a bully too. In both God of War and the MCU, Heimdall is the eyes of Odin and of the Nine Realms. Now, unlike the MCU counterparts who used all that for, the betterment of the Nine Realms and the stability of their realm, their people, God of War's Heimdall takes a much darker and villainous path. We now get to Lady Sif, as they call her in the MCU, Sif in God of War Ragnarok. And I must say, in the MCU, she's just there to be honest. Like, they've done her so dirty, someone who's been a companion of Thor since the first movie. When you compare God of War Sif to the MCU Sif, it looks like the MCU Sif and Freya from God of War has switched places. In the MCU, Sif is much more of a warrior and just Thor's friend and companion instead of his wife in God of War War. Sif in God of War Ragnarok takes the role of Frigga in the MCU. She's much more motherly, married to Thor, has official businesses that she tends to, but mostly she takes care of the home. So in the layman's terms, in the MCU, Sif is the warrior. In God of War Ragnarok, Sif takes on the maternal role. And a switch to that, in the MCU, Frigga or Freya takes on the maternal role. Also in God of War Ragnarok, Frigga is the fierce warrior. You see that switch that they've done to these two characters. Now that's the conclusion of the characters, but of course you can't talk about these characters without talking about Asgard. Asgard in God of War Ragnarok is just plain. It just looks like a Nordic village, something built by humans instead of, a place that gods live. Don't get me wrong, like the place looks beautiful, but when you compare it to the MCU where everything is gold, the structures are large and huge, you have the rainbow bridge, everything just looks majestic, a place, a locale fit for gods. Now that's it for the video. Let me know in the comments below what you think of these characters and the switcheroo, their origins, some of them changed and all that. Though God of War Ragnarok takes more inspiration from, the Norse mythology instead of the MCU taking inspiration from the comics. Of course, the comics was also based on Norse mythology, but, it's loose. You have some similarities like Odin having an eye patch, having lost his eye. That's just about it. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this, and if you have played the God of War Ragnarok game, what your overall thoughts about it is. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe, turn on that post notification bell not to miss any other video. As always, Nerdy Sage here. See you guys in the next one.